There are a lot of misconceptions and falsehoods surrounding electric vehicles, even today. That they're slow or boring or expensive, that they are worse for the planet than internal combustion engine cars, or that they have batteries that will need replacing every few years at a cost of tens of thousands. I've busted each and every one of these on this channel in the past. They are fully debunked. Or as I might say in my home dialect from Norwich, Norfolk, that's a load of squit. Yet, while most enthusiasts of cleaner, greener, safer and smarter vehicles are more than happy to debunk the falsehoods I've just listed, many are all too happy to perpetuate their own misconceptions, often in the comments section on this channel. These include the idea that Elon Musk founded Tesla and was responsible for designing the Tesla Roadster, that big automakers are lying when they say they're going to bring new electric models to market, that every legacy automaker out there will ultimately cease to exist in the next 5 to 10 years, and that Tesla, and only Tesla, will save us all. And today, I'm here to provide some figures and context that suggests no, mainstream automakers aren't dying, although they may still be going electric for reasons that are not 100% pure of heart. I'm here to prove that transitioning the world's fleet to electric, something that has been at the core of Tesla's existence since day one, cannot happen without a global push from every automaker, and to stem some of the hyper-unrealistic impressions that people have of the auto industry as a whole. And for good measure, I'm going to explain why we need more than one company to make this major transportation and energy transition happen around the world. Before I get to that, let's tie up that first misconception I mentioned. Elon Musk wasn't the founder of Tesla, but rather a very early A-series investor who put a sizable amount of money, about $6.5 million, into the company and soon after became chairman of the board of directors. It was only after a lawsuit settlement with the actual founders in 2009 that Musk became known as a co-founder. Musk didn't also design the Roadster either, but he did play an important role in getting the car to production status. And of course, without Musk's involvement, I suspect the company's future would have been very different, so it is very important to acknowledge his influence in those early days at the company. I'm not stating this to diminish Musk's impact or position, but rather to highlight how law, and there is a lot surrounding Tesla because of its cult status, has a habit of overshadowing what actually happens. Which brings me rather nicely to the meat of today's video, the notion that legacy automakers will all be killed by Tesla in the next decade. It is a sentiment that I see regularly in the comments section, so I know it's a fairly commonly held belief. But again, beliefs are not facts. You can hope a belief becomes reality, but when it comes to the sheer size of the global automotive industry, facts suggest something else. The facts suggest that Tesla alone can't transition the world's fleet to electric, and facts remind us that of the world's top 4 global automakers in 2019, 3 have now made major commitments to electric vehicles, primarily because of Tesla. Commitments that, while people complain in the comments section aren't enough, will ultimately have a big impact. Last year, Tesla produced and delivered approximately 500,000 cars. I know the actual figures are slightly different, but in a second it will become apparent why I rounded up and rounded down. And by the way, for all figures in this video, I'm going to do the same thing. Tesla's 2020 figures are the largest production and delivery figures that the company has ever managed, and is frankly an amazing accomplishment. What's more, as we learned during the Q4 and year-end earnings call, that figure is less than 1/2 of what Tesla's current theoretical maximum annual production capacity is right now. Even before Tesla expands Giga Shanghai, brings Giga Berlin online, and finishes Giga Texas, it's going to be producing upwards of 1 million cars this year. And next year I could see that double again to 2 million vehicles, assuming of course Tesla can make enough batteries, which is an entirely different problem. Right now, there is no doubt that Tesla is the world's leader in electric vehicles, a leader by a long shot. In fact, right now, few automakers are anywhere near to Tesla in terms of production volume or electric vehicle advancement. But when it comes to sheer numbers of vehicles rolling off the production line, legacy automakers do have Tesla beat. And that's going to be very important into the future because the figures don't add up for a solo run from Tesla, or in fact, any other company. Every year, between 60 and 80 million cars and light-duty trucks are made globally. Last year, because of COVID, that figure was just under 64 million units, although at the start of last year, it was expected to be closer to 89 million units, and then, you know what happened. This year, estimates from IHS Markit predict that we'll see 76.5 million cars and light-duty trucks produced. A sizable amount of that market share will come from China, thanks to growth in the number of people who are actually able to afford to buy a car there. And it's expected to be tracked in time by other markets around the world, including India and large parts of Africa. In 2019, 23.7 million cars were sold in China. 17.2 million cars were sold in the United States. And in third place came Japan, which sold 5.3 million cars. But when it comes to companies and their vehicle production outputs, in that same year, Volkswagen was the world's largest automaker, making 10.8 million vehicles. Toyota was in second place with 10.5 million vehicles, and General Motors came in third place with 8.8 million. Ford, in fourth place, made and sold 5.7 million vehicles. Right now, experts are warning us that we have years rather than decades to make drastic permanent changes to how we use, travel and energy, or face irreversible changes to the planet. The planet, of course, will be fine long term, whatever happens, but we, and life on it as a whole, may not. There's already significant evidence to suggest that the plans governments have around the world to tackle climate change and greenhouse gas emissions are too little too late. But pressure from governments on automakers is starting to make a difference, and that pressure, as well as a sizable amount of Fomo on many automakers' parts, is causing change. Fomo to Tesla, of course. Volkswagen, General Motors and Ford have all expanded their respective electric vehicle plans and have announced major investments into the sector. The amount of money pledged to be spent over the next 5 to 10 years is not small change either. Take General Motors, for example. It hasn't posted its quarterlies for Q4 last year yet, but in 2019, it turned an operating profit of $8.4 billion. Its $27 billion earmarked for electric and autonomous vehicles over the next 5 years equates to roughly $5.4 billion per year, or near as damn it 1/2 of the company's operating profit for 2019. Ford ended last year with an adjusted $2.8 billion EBIT, something that was significantly lower than the previous year for sure. Yet Ford still committed to spending $22 billion in developing EVs over the next 4 years. I could look to Volkswagen's spend too, but I think you get the idea. Each of these big legacy automakers are now acting like their metaphorical tails are on fire, committing to spending huge amounts of money on trying to change course and head towards a more EV-centric future because of legislative and market forces. And unlike Tesla, which has to build out production volume for its vehicles, each of those 3 automakers already have insane production volume just waiting to be retooled for electric vehicles. Of course, doing that is part of the cost. Retooling a production line takes time and money. Retraining staff takes time and money. But a car is a car is a car, and you can bet your bottom dollar that engineers at each of the companies I've mentioned, and hopefully every other automaker, although I'm honestly not sure on that, are already well underway with plans for new electric models that we don't know anything about. To claim that legacy automakers are lying or faking their investment pledges betrays a lack of understanding in how the automotive industry works. Automakers, like any business, are there to make money. They will do that by making products, and if there's a market demand for something, they'll figure out a way to exploit that demand and also to shape that demand with advertising, and you get the idea. Right now, market forces are changing. These legacy companies need to change or die, and right now governments around the world need them to succeed, not die. We need them to succeed, and thus investment is happening. Companies are waking up to their previous poor choices when it comes to electric vehicles and realizing that if they wish to stay in business, they need to change. And that's what we're seeing now. Some of that change is happening at the behest of those in charge. Some of that change is happening because the future is paved with tightening legislation that will make it harder for legacy automakers to continue to do what they had been doing, putting profit from gas guzzlers before any solid future plans. And yes, some of that change in policy is because of the change of occupant in the White House. This reminds me that the auto industry is fickle, and yes, that does mean that we should view any proclamation with healthy skepticism. But to be truly skeptical, we need to see evidence of one path or another, and I would submit that we're now seeing that from Volkswagen, Ford, and General Motors. We're seeing evidence of a slow change, a change that I would rather have happened a long, long time ago, but nevertheless, a change. So far, I've dismissed the idea that Tesla can transition the world to electric cars on its own, because it can't. No one company can. It would take 6 companies the size of Volkswagen to do it. I've dismissed the idea that automakers are somehow lying about their investments and plans. I don't think they are. They have to be answerable to their shareholders, and their shareholders demand continued financial sustainability. Electric vehicles are the only logical step right now in a world of tightening regulations. But I think we can confirm that the motivation for making the switch by many large automakers isn't driven by the desire to change the world. It's driven by profit and continued corporate financial sustainability. How you view that is up to you. I am disappointed by any automaker making a decision on the back of that, but then again, most companies would react the same way, even at the most basic level. This company and Tesla are driven at some point by the need to keep money coming in. Which brings me to the claims made by those in comment threads that automakers are all talk and no show. Ultimately, it's usually aimed at GM or Ford, with commenters combining expletives and stating that in no uncertain terms, Tesla will beat everyone, period. And to tackle this, I think it's important to remind ourselves how traditional automakers work. They'll tease a concept, they'll tease a prototype, and then you tend to not hear all that much until a vehicle is ready to be produced. But not hearing doesn't mean that nothing is happening. In traditional automakers, all of that development stuff goes on behind closed doors. Tesla is different in that regard, in so much as Elon Musk is very transparent about what's happening. He discusses engineering publicly, and through the early access beta programs, Tesla is testing things in a quasi-public way. Side note, I say quasi-public here because while you do see videos of people testing this online, the majority of the beta test drivers for full self-driving, for example, are limited by NDAs. They don't discuss their experiences because they're under an NDA. So what you see online is skewed. You don't see the full development, but you do see progress. And thus, when you don't see progress or perceived progress from traditional automakers, it's super easy to call them out and accuse them of lying, but they don't need to raise funds in the same way Tesla has in the past. Someone retorted in the weekend comments section that Ford was lying because it only had the Mustang Mach-E, that the Mustang Mach-E wasn't a real vehicle and was instead a limited-run compliance car, and that neither the Ford F-150 electric nor the E-Transit would amount to anything. But in the many conversations I've had with auto industry insiders, from engineers through to designers, battery specialists, and test drivers, I can tell you that all of the 3 companies I've highlighted today, Volkswagen, Ford, and GM, and others as well, are working equally as hard behind the scenes as Tesla. They just aren't showcasing it as much, partly because they don't need to raise capital. So if automakers are working on electric vehicles, what lays ahead in terms of challenges? The biggest one I can see is getting batteries. Even Tesla can't get enough of them right now, so any automaker that's sourcing its own raw materials or building its own battery facilities to produce cells in-house is going to be in a much stronger position than a company that relies on external sourcing. And right now, Volkswagen has invested in and begun production of its own battery facility in the US and in Germany with its battery partners, just like Tesla did with Panasonic. The same is true for GM. The only outlier in this is Ford, which has opted to rely on traditional supply chains to get its battery cells. That is already restricting Mustang Mach-E production, but as I have said multiple times on this channel, Ford is working on an electric version of the most popular truck in America, a pickup truck that sells more than 1 million units per year. Even if Ford's initial production run of an electric F-150 is just a fraction of that, it could be enough of an incentive to get a discount or a long-term supply contract for its batteries. Again, it is about stability. If Ford can give a battery supplier a long-term contract worth several $100 billion, it's going to do better than a company that's shopping for a few hundred megawatt hours per year. But I'm not going to lie. Right now, that's the thing that scares me most about Ford's approach. No in-house battery production in a market where there's already a strain on supply scares me. Which brings me to the two final points. First, the historical one. Pretty much every major automaker has been negative on electric vehicles in the past, and perhaps none so much as GM and Toyota, and for a time, Volkswagen. People ask why we should support car companies that continue to sell gas guzzlers and were responsible for either killing electric cars in the past or campaigning against their existence. I have honestly no definitive answer here. I would personally love nothing better than to see Toyota, GM and others to publicly admit that killing electric car programs of days gone by was their worst mistake. That they are willing to make reparations for the damage done by their gas-guzzling SUVs and pickup trucks. And yes, I believe they should, as Volkswagen has done with Dieselgate. In an ideal world where time wasn't running out and we had more electric vehicle choice, it would be a luxury to not choose them. But right now, for reasons I've detailed in this video, we don't have that time. There's no way one company can do this transition on its own. This is a group effort, and it has to be a group effort. So I am okay with supporting the vehicles that do what we want to see more of. It's a little two-faced after decades of complaining that legacy automakers aren't making electric vehicles to then continue to criticize them when they do, don't you think? There's some metaphorical goalpost moving there going on that makes me very uncomfortable. Should we demand more, though? Absolutely. Always. More choice, more price range, and more accessibility. More accountability for automakers and dealers. Better dealer training. Better conversations about electric mobility and electric fuel. That last one is something that's pretty much ignored by the industry in general. Which leaves us where? Automakers are finally coming on board with a kind of investment that most automotive startups can't manage. They are going to chase Tesla. They won't catch Tesla up, but that's okay, because I'd rather have multiple automakers providing a breadth of choice than one monopoly. And if you're still fuming and calling for the destruction of legacy automakers, I want you to ask yourself this. Which hill do you want to die on? The one where one company kills all others, possibly to the detriment of EV adoption rates and consumer choice? Or the one where companies have done terrible things in the past, but have changed their ways, and we can help them change their ways and accelerate the transition to cleaner vehicles faster? I don't think you can have both, but you can have one company put the fear of God into others, Tesla, to drag legacy automakers kicking and screaming lest they go out of business. After all, some people work well under pressure. That's it for today. As always, thanks to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons. That's John Lyons, Raging Fellows, Jeffrey Songster, Anonymous Freak, Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, and Tesla in the Gong. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. That's Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Sean Ueda, Will Graylin, and Ian. You can join all of these amazing Patreon supporters by following the links below, or you can send us a donation through Ko-fi or Bitcoin. You'll also find a link to our free Discord server, so please do consider signing up and coming to join in the fun. There's probably going to be lots of discussion about this episode in the Discord. And if you're in need of some swag, do check out our merch over at Redbubble. After the names are finished scrolling, you will see a suggestion for a new video to watch, so please consider watching it if you haven't. And I will be back very soon. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!